a video on tomato soup. So I've been faffing around with 3 ingredient pasta, and I made it really cheap. I made it for 34 pence a portion using tomato puree. My idea was that, of course, we can buy tins of tomatoes and all that kind of stuff, but if you've got some tomato puree in the cupboard, we can make a cheap dinner with it. The only problem when you buy a tin of tomato puree, a tube of tomato puree, is that it doesn't last indefinitely. So you've kind of got to use it up. And then I was kind of thinking, if I ever did I was watching lots of those food challenges where it's like feed yourself for £1 a day type of thing, and it was kind of going through my mind, well, what are the best way to kind of buy tomatoes? And if you just need one tomatoes for one dish, you're probably best off just buying a tin of cheap tomatoes, even though it's cheaper to buy tomato puree and tomato passata. So cheaper to buy tins of tomatoes and buy and packets of that for the volume that you get. It's cheaper to buy passata and puree than a tin of tomatoes. But if you waste half the passata, it kind of goes off by the time you get around to using it. Or the same with the tomato puree. It's not a saving. But I was kind of thinking, if I was to do one of those food challenges, it would be more economical to buy a tube of tomato puree, and then you could do other things with it. So you could do the 34 pence pasta, 3 ingredient pasta, and then I was kind of thinking, well, you could make some soup as well. So you could have some of your meals as soups, which would be quite nice. So I've made cheap tomato soup before. I made it with either passata or tin tomatoes, but I'm going to make it like old school, like the first chef that I worked for and my college lecturers would make a tomato soup. Not exactly how they'd make it, because they'd put a gastrique in, which is a reduction of vinegar and sugar. Not going to do that. We're going to, also that makes it taste like Heinz tomato soup, which is not what I want. So I'm going to do it as, basically make like a white onion soup. So the onions are going to be the basis of the soup, and then we're going to add some tomato puree to that and work out what kind of quantity of tomato puree we need to put into a certain amount of soup, and that's how we'll make it. And then also that kind of fits in with I had this idea of doing like buy the cheapest things that you can buy in this sense and see what all things you can make with them, and stock cubes, some form of tomato, onions and milk were on that list. So what we need to do is we need to peel and chop the onions, cook them in some water with a couple of stock cubes, puree that down, add some tomato puree and some milk, and then kind of work out the recipe. And then I'll do the short version for YouTube shorts, and then we'll have a longer version of me prattling on like I am now. So I'll do some things, I'll chop some things, I'll peel some things, I'll cook some things, and it will be a more interesting point in the video. Right, so the recipe was kilo of onions, 700 millilitres of water, 4 chicken stock cubes, salt and pepper, 200 millilitres of milk, and then 150 grams of tomato puree. So, I said season with salt and pepper, didn't I? Yes. So, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, peel and chop your onions, cook them in the liquid, cook them in the water with the stock cubes, and then puree that down. Now, you kind of say, well, why don't we add the milk and the tomato puree at the start of the cooking process? I feel that it might be a little bit too thick if we add the tomato puree, because it'll thicken up the liquid that's cooking the onions, and there's a chance that it will stick at the bottom of the pan. We don't want that, so all we really want to do is cook and the milk has a habit of foaming and maybe splitting as well if we cook it too much. So it's best to cook the onions, the stock and the water first, and then add in the tomato puree and the milk at the end, and then we don't get a split sauce, and it's kind of quite nice. So we need to work out how much that's made. Oh, we need to turn it off, the heat underneath it. So we need to see how much we've made and then we can do like a costing of how much. So it's almost made. Just licking my fingers. Still a little bit in the pan. I reckon there we have made, no, that's cups. We don't do cups. I reckon that's made just short of 2 litres. So I reckon that makes about 2 litres. The only thing you've got to be careful of is that when you're cooking the onions, we don't boil them rapidly, because that's going to make all the steam evaporate more. So we just want a gentle cooking, and then we don't lose moisture. So we kind of get that volume, we don't have to add it later. So anyway, so I reckon that's going to be cheap. So I'll do a quick calculation. Right, so we've made that for about £1.34. So I reckon 250 millilitres per portion. How much is in a tin of soup? 400 grams. I reckon I get 4 portions out of a litre, 250 millilitres. So that's like 8 portions, isn't it? So divide that by 8. That's 8 generous portions. 8 equals. So that's 16.7 pence. So like 17 pence a portion. It's pretty cheap, isn't it? So, yeah, I say there was 4 chicken stock cubes in it, yeah. So for the quick one, I might do half that recipe, because I can't imagine that people really want to make 2 litres worth of soup. I suppose if there were 6 of you, there'd be seconds, wouldn't there? But anyway, so yeah, that's a success, and really cheap, like 17 pence a portion. That's really cheap, is that? But anyway, so kind of puts to bed that idea that food's expensive. If we know what we do, we can just make things. We can still make delicious things on a slightly cheaper budget, can't we? Anyway, so that's a success. Cheap, delicious tomato soup for 17 pence a portion. To make 1 litre, you will need 500 grams worth of onions, 75 grams worth of tomato puree, 2 chicken stock cubes, 350 millilitres of water, and 100 millilitres of whole milk. Cook your peeled and chopped onions in the water and chicken stock until tender. Add the tomato puree and milk. Puree until smooth. Season with salt and pepper and enjoy.